Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video I'll be discussing some brief thoughts on the 8th episode of the anime series, Suisei no Gargantia. Cast over the entirety of this episode was a somber pall. In the opening moments, we see Fleet Commander Fairlock passing away, effectively handing over the reins of the whole of Gargantia to Rigid, his confidant and in some aspects, adopted daughter. A lot of this episode is dedicated to Fairlock's funerary rites, which is accented essentially as a burial at sea. But there is also a fair amount of themes that carry over from the last episode, in that some of the sister ships of the main hub of Gargantia wish to leave and set a course of their own to follow, the merits or lack thereof of which remain truly in the eye of the beholder. But among the many mourning faces, there are also faces that carry masks of doubt as to Rigid's capabilities in commanding and keeping safe the Gargantian fleet. Even she has doubts in her own capabilities along these lines. Yet does she find value in the words offered to her by both Pinion and Bellows, the former, one could argue, departing his sentiments in a mock fashion, that Rigid can't even hope to prove herself capable of leading Gargantia if her words cannot even convince the other captains to stay with it. And the latter suggesting largely that no matter how tough Fairlock seemed as their heartfelt and strong leader, in reality he never dared to take on the responsibilities alone, confiding and finding guidance in his best people, as all good captains should. And so it was ultimately encouraging to see Rigid, even though it was mildly predictable, setting her duties aside long enough to pay tribute to the body of their former leader at the 11th hour before his remains were cast off and laid to rest under the tumultuous tides. Coinciding with all of this was Leto's realization that his aspirations to return home would now and forever get him nowhere. While I still believe his current placement to have been a time-shifted one, and that he wound back to a past Earth, or possibly a future one, the Earth as it stands now is farther away from the Alliance fleet he's left behind than he ever could have imagined, and so he's left largely feeling as though he has no sense of purpose. And even if this Earth is set within the exact same time frame as the battles that are still ultimately waging between humankind and the Hideos, it's still impossible for him to return to them. And with his now knowing and accepting these facts, we see his determination shift to the threat, as he sees it, of the whale squid inhabitants of the Earth, the Earthborn version of the Hideos, as a fledgling strand unwound from the tapestry of his mission that he can only hope will quell his lack of purpose and potentially save the humans of this world. But all the while his eyes are set on this impending war, there's another war ultimately brewing right in front of him that he is oblivious to. It isn't the disassociating ships of Gargantia, nor is it the seeming lack in the unity in the remaining factions. Instead, it's a battle waging in the heart of Amy. Amy is effectively heartbroken, though it takes her a while to appreciate her feelings and admit to them. She's already become aware of one of her friends who is leaving, which is bad enough, although in that she can still wish her friend Melty well, as there's always the potential that it could bring better things for Melty, as she believes. But going with the ship that takes Melty away is Leto. In the deal struck up with Pinion, which we actually see firsthand herein, he's agreed to wipe out the Earth Hideos and leave any potential spoils to Pinion and the rest of his offshoot fleet, his only concern being with the eradication of these creatures. And we come to see that, in some twisted sense, he's rationalized his feelings for Amy as a contributing factor to his goal, as we see in his conversation with Bevel once Amy's emotional torrent has surfaced, that Leto believes his actions to be what saves Amy, not only saves her life, but potentially saves her from the sadness of losing her brother, her family, which he relates back to the boy we saw in the flashback a few episodes ago. He notes that this may have been his younger brother, although I still think it's debatable, and that this boy who looked like him was put to death, having been too weak to ever effectively fight or survive against the alien threat of the Hideos. This rightfully horrifies Bevel, and it's a wonder how it doesn't equally horrify Leto himself. But his mind is made up of the processed and guided mentalities of a soldier in this cause. He can only see his mission, and failing having one, it's ultimately been a learning curve for him to comprehend living a natural life. And so it is implied by the end that the ships have broken from the fleet and set off on their own with Leto in tow, although they leave off early enough for us not to be absolutely certain that that's the actual case. And we find that Rigid, upon addressing the mourning fleet after having dedicated Fairlock's remains to the ocean, finding support in her people in answer to the courage shown in her asking for their help. We leave off still as yet to wonder what will come next, whether Leto will actually take on Earth's whale squid forces, and whether he'll be able to successfully wipe them out, or instead open a whole can of hurt on the offshore offshoot fleet that may or may not lead the Earth Hideaws back to Gargantia. And I also suspect we haven't seen the last of the pirate fleets either, which would be all too convenient for them to take on Gargantia without so much of their massive fleet or their flying Yunboro protector anywhere to be found. It would be a massacre in the making. And so for now, that'll be it for me on this one. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this episode if you've seen it, and what you think is coming next, and whether you believe Leto will ultimately open his eyes to the happiness he could have on Gargantia, or will we instead see him ultimately losing it all in some gallant but poorly contrived self-sacrifice for all the wrong reasons? Let me know down below, and otherwise I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.